I spend making YouTube videos. I'm also talking about the attention it brings. In just the last 18 months, this YouTube channel has gained about 12 million subscribers. And because of people stealing my content and posting it on other platforms.
Something happened to Luke Nichols in early 2025. His videos started changing. The joy seemed forced. His kids looked uncomfortable. Then came the announcement that broke millions of hearts. Luke was stepping away from Outdoor Boys for a while. But leaked messages tell a different story. Friends say he was exhausted, overwhelmed, and facing problems he couldn't solve on camera. The truth about why he really quit reveals the dark side of family fame. And it's not what anyone expected from America's favorite outdoor dad. Luke Nichols was born in 1978 in Anchorage, Alaska, and from the start, the wild felt like home to him. He grew up surrounded by snowy mountains, thick forests, and rivers so cold they could take your breath away. His childhood was full of fresh air, deep woods, and silence broken only by rushing water and the crunch of boots on snow. Long before he could even remember, he was already fishing with his family. They say he was just a baby when he first came along on salmon runs and trout trips. His father, his grandfathers, and his older brother showed him how to fish, how to hold a rod, how to feel the tension in the line. By the time other kids were learning video games, Luke was already catching Arctic char like it was second nature. But it wasn't just about catching fish. Alaska's wild terrain taught him how to survive. He learned how to build a fire while the rain poured down. He learned how to build a shelter out of nothing but branches and snow. He could walk into the woods with a knife and come back fed and safe. It wasn't training. It was just life. People around him quickly noticed that Luke had a kind of calm others didn't. Even as a teenager, he was the one you wanted around when the storm hit. If a tent collapsed in a blizzard, Luke could rebuild it while joking about dinner. And yes, he could still cook over a fire like it was nothing. But his life wasn't only about the outdoors. Luke grew up in a family with strong beliefs. They were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and faith was something he took seriously. At 19, he made a decision that would change everything. In 1997, he left Alaska and flew across the world to Japan, not for adventure, but for a 2-year mission. At first, everything was unfamiliar. New language, new customs, new streets. But Luke adapted. He didn't just survive in Japan, he grew there. He later said, "Those 2 years were the most amazing experience of my life." He learned Japanese. He made friends. He taught people about his faith. And somewhere along the way, he found a deeper confidence, one that would stay with him forever. He had faced the unknown and made it feel like home. When he returned to the U.S. in the late 1990s, he didn't go back to Alaska right away. Instead, he headed to Utah and enrolled at Brigham Young University around the year 2000. It was another mountain landscape, but this time the focus was on books and ideas. He studied political science, but no one who knew him thought he'd become just a man of theory. Luke was still the same guy who wanted to be outdoors. While other students spent weekends in libraries, he disappeared into rivers and canyons. Fly fishing and hiking were still part of his routine. He balanced his academic life with the quiet call of nature. And then, something happened that changed everything again. At a church gathering in Provo, he met Rebecca. She was smart, focused, and just as rooted in faith as he was. Their connection wasn't loud, but it was real. They talked about ideas, about life, about what mattered. And Luke, with all his stories and scars from the wilderness, finally met someone who saw not just the wild man, but the soul behind it. Rebecca had dreams of her own, and she would later go on to build a powerful career. But in those early days, she and Luke were just two students trying to find their place in the world. As their bond grew deeper, it became clear they were meant to walk that path together. By the early 2000s, Luke had finished his degree. Not long after, he and Rebecca got married and started building a life that would one day include family, business, and adventures shared with millions. Right after finishing his political science degree, Luke Nichols was full of energy and ideas. He didn't dream of camping gear or fishing trips yet. In the early 2000s, not long after graduation, he jumped headfirst into politics. He started his own political consulting firm and began helping candidates run their campaigns. For a young man in his 20s, this was bold, but it worked. Within just 3 years, Luke had worked on about 20 campaigns. Some were local races. Others may have reached state-level positions. He was constantly managing people, crafting strategies, and pushing hard to help others win. His focus and work ethic were sharp. He was a natural strategist, able to handle the pressure that came with political races. But the reality of that world started wearing him down. Luke later said the job was draining everything out of him. It wasn't just the long hours, it was the whole environment. He was constantly on the road, constantly on the phone, and constantly under stress. The political world didn't rest, and neither could he. By then, Luke had just gotten married. His wife Rebecca was by his side, and they were starting to think about their future, maybe even a family. But the idea of raising kids while working 100-hour weeks in a high-stress world started to feel impossible. Luke could see where this road was headed, and he didn't like it. So he made a big decision. He shut down his business. After spending 3 grueling years fighting political battles and winning campaigns, Luke Nichols walked away. It wasn't failure, it was clarity. He realized his values didn't match the lifestyle politics demanded. He chose his marriage and his future family over fame and fast-paced success. Around the mid-2000s, Luke and Rebecca packed up their lives in Utah and moved to Virginia. It was a fresh start, and it wasn't random. Luke had made up his mind. He would go back to school and study law. He wasn't giving up on making a difference. He just needed a better path to do it. One that wouldn't cost him his peace or the people he loved. When Luke Nichols moved to Virginia around 2005, it wasn't just about school, it was a fresh start. He enrolled at George Mason University's School of Law, which later became known as the Antonin Scalia Law School. Over the next 3 years, he threw himself into studying the law, focusing especially on criminal law. The school was right outside Washington, D.C., placing Luke near the heart of legal action, and that gave him the perfect place to grow and sharpen his skills. By 2008, he had earned his Juris Doctor degree. It was a big moment. With a law degree in hand, Luke didn't waste any time. He passed the bar exam and quickly started his own law practice. He and his wife, Rebecca, decided to stay in Northern Virginia, close to the capital, but far enough to have some peace. Luke focused on criminal defense and became an expert in traffic law. His days were filled with cases involving speeding tickets, DUIs, and other driving-related charges. To some, it might have seemed dull compared to the wild outdoor adventures he would later be known for. But Luke didn't treat it like a boring job. He paid close attention to every detail, studied every tiny rule, and became one of the best in his field. Word spread. His client base grew. His reputation got stronger, and it gave him what he needed the most at the time: stability. With that steady income, he and Rebecca bought a house out in the Virginia countryside. It was quiet, it was calm, there was space to breathe. It was exactly what they needed to build a family. Around 2012 or 2013, their first son, Thomas, whom they lovingly called Tommy, was born. Luke was overjoyed. A few years later came Nathan, or Nate, and then came Jacob, the youngest of the three. By the middle of the 2010s, Luke and Rebecca were the proud parents of 3 little boys. Their home was full of toys, noise, bedtime stories, and laughter. And without knowing it, they were laying the foundation for something that would later explode into fame: the Outdoor Boys. Luke's days were full. He was a respected attorney, showing up in court in a suit, defending his clients with confidence. But when he came home, everything changed. He became a different man. A dad who changed diapers, a father who told silly stories and took his boys on little fishing trips. The home they had bought gave the kids a safe place to run around, dig in the dirt, and discover the world. And Rebecca wasn't just building a home. She was building a powerful career of her own. She would later become the Director of Education at the American Statistical Association, a respected and important role in Washington, D.C. Both of them believed deeply in education, faith, and family. Sundays were often spent in church. Evenings were filled with fireflies, giggles, and backyard adventures. It all started around 2013. Luke Nichols was still working full-time as an attorney. His life was packed: tight deadlines, stacks of paperwork, and the usual chaos of raising a newborn because baby Tommy had just arrived. But even in the middle of all that, Luke couldn't shake his lifelong love for the outdoors. Every weekend, he found a reason to grab a rod, pack his gear, and head toward a riverbank. Sometimes alone, sometimes with a stroller nearby. And then one day, something shifted. He decided to press record. He started a small YouTube channel called Catfish and Carp. There wasn't any grand plan. It was just Luke, a simple setup, and the hope that someone out there might enjoy watching him catch fish and talk about tackle. His focus was clear from the start: big catfish, massive carp. The kinds of fish most people ignored, but Luke loved. He filmed himself casting lines, showing bait tricks, and sometimes just walking through the woods with a muddy smile on his face. On weekdays, he was a lawyer in a suit, but online, he was just a guy in rubber boots, standing in the water and laughing when a fish stole his bait. The audience came slowly, but it came. Not because of fancy cameras or slick editing, but because Luke felt real. His hands were dirty, his advice was useful, and his stories felt like something your neighbor might tell you over a fence. People noticed, and within just a few years, Catfish and Carp crossed 100,000 subscribers. YouTube mailed him the silver play button, and that was the moment when Luke realized something bigger might be happening. But as time went on, Luke also noticed the channel wasn't growing like it used to. Fishing was fun. It was a passion. But it was also a narrow slice of YouTube. By the middle of the 2010s, growth had slowed, and Luke was thinking about more than just fish. His 2 sons, Tommy and Nate, were growing fast. They were big enough to follow him around now, tiny boots kicking up dirt, chasing frogs and climbing rocks. And Luke had another idea. He started wondering, what if the channel wasn't just about fishing? What if it was about family? What if it was about adventures, laughs, and kids learning how to roast marshmallows over a real fire? So on May 5th, 2015, Luke and his wife Rebecca launched a second YouTube channel. They called it Outdoor Boys. That first video didn't have anything fancy. No dramatic intro, no big promises. It was just Luke and Rebecca walking with Tommy and Nate through the woods. The camera followed as they hiked, camped, played in rivers, built rafts, and even tried silly survival tricks just to see what would happen. And it clicked. There was something powerful about watching a family get dirty together, mess things up, and have fun anyway. It wasn't a Hollywood version of survival. It was a real dad figuring things out with his kids. And viewers fell in love with that. Some videos showed how to build tarp shelters or cook in the wild. Others followed the boys as they tried sleeping in homemade forts or went metal detecting in old fields. There were knife-making experiments, DIY boat adventures, and even hilarious moments when something completely failed, and Luke just laughed and rolled with it. But through all of it, Luke didn't let go of his first channel. He kept running catfish and carp side by side. That channel became the place for the hardcore anglers, people who wanted deep dives into fishing gear, monster catches, and pro-level tips. Outdoor Boys became something else. It was about life outdoors, family, storytelling, adventure. He'd film a peaceful fishing scene for catfish and carp, and then turn around and capture a moment where Tommy proudly reeled in his first fish for Outdoor Boys. One video might be about tying a perfect rig. The next one might show Nate giggling while learning how to skip stones. Each channel had its own rhythm. One was technique, the other was heart. By the end of 2015, the decision to start Outdoor Boys was already paying off. The subscriber count shot into the hundreds of thousands. People all over the world were watching toddlers learn how to build fires or fall in love with the wilderness for the first time. It wasn't about perfect production. Luke still used a GoPro or whatever camera he had. Rebecca sometimes held the shot while balancing a kid on one hip. But none of that mattered. If anything, it made it feel more real. By now, Catfish and Carp had grown to over 1.1 million subscribers, and Outdoor Boys was catching up fast. Luke had created something rare, a digital space where families could see themselves, laugh together, and maybe even get inspired to step outside. By 2017, that quiet hobby had grown into something massive. Outdoor Boys was blowing up on YouTube. Luke's calm voice and warm personality pulled people in, and soon the entire Nichols family became familiar faces to millions of viewers. 1 million subscribers came faster than anyone expected. That golden play button wasn't just a number. It was proof that something magical was happening. People couldn't get enough. Whether it was Luke building an igloo with his kids in a winter storm, or trying to make fire with sticks while the boys cheered him on, the channel had a charm that made you smile. It taught you something without ever feeling like a lesson. And Luke was evolving too. His short clips turned into long, carefully told stories. Some episodes were 30 minutes, others stretched past an hour. You'd see him canoe through remote Canadian lakes or build an entire log cabin using nothing but hand tools. It wasn't just about what they built or where they went. It was the feeling, the struggle, the way Luke didn't hide the hard parts. Storms would blow away their progress. Injuries would slow them down. But he kept filming. He kept going. By the end of 2020, something big changed. Luke had been a lawyer for nearly 10 years, but now YouTube was earning more than his law practice ever did. That year, he made a bold choice. He left the courtroom behind and made content creation his full-time job. He stayed licensed, just in case, but it was clear his heart belonged in the wild. He later said it simply: traveling and fishing had become bigger than his law career. He traded in his suit for camping boots, and he never looked back. Once he committed fully, everything grew. The videos became more ambitious. The adventures got wilder. The boys got older and braver. One winter, Luke and little Nate built a snow shelter and slept inside with nothing but a candle. Another time, he and Tommy survived on a desert island, eating coconuts and fishing for their meals. It wasn't pretend. It was raw and real. They were out there for days. They didn't stay local either. They went back to Alaska, where Luke had grown up, camping deep in the wilderness where bears and moose roamed freely. In early 2024, Luke snow machined 120 miles through the frozen wild, just to reach a remote, off-grid property he had recently bought. For 4 days, they hunted game birds, explored frozen rivers, followed dog sled trails, and fished through the ice. He even joked that they might not make it back without a bush plane. But he was grinning when he said it. That was the point. It was risky. It was real. Luke also loved building things. He filmed huge DIY projects with the boys, like cutting down trees and notching logs to build a real log cabin. He hurt himself halfway through that one, but even then, he kept filming, showing how he worked through the pain and kept the homestead project alive. That story didn't just show muscles, it showed heart. They didn't stay in America either. Luke took the whole family to Australia. There, the boys learned to throw boomerangs and saw animals they'd only read about before. In one jaw-dropping moment, Tommy waded near a crocodile in shallow water, while Luke filmed from just a few feet away. It ended safely, but viewers held their breath as they watched it unfold. That clip became famous, and fans never forgot it. As time passed, the channel became more than just a survival guide or family vlog. It became a symbol. People didn't just tune in for the adventures. They came to feel something. Families watched it together. Parents saw how Luke involved his sons. Kids saw what nature looked like without filters. And everyone learned something. Whether it was how to catch fish with a handmade trap, how to bake a pizza over a fire, or how to make memories that last, Luke showed it all in a way that made you want to try. By the end of 2023, Outdoor Boys wasn't just popular. It was everywhere. Clips from their videos went viral on TikTok. The hashtag Outdoor Boys appeared on thousands of videos, racking up tens of millions of views. Even people who didn't know the full episode started recognizing Luke, the skinny guy with glasses who made wilderness look fun and family-friendly. And then came the surge. In late 2023, the channel had around 6 million subscribers. By May 2025, that number had exploded to 15.3 million. That meant 9 million new fans in just over a year. Few channels in YouTube's history had grown like that. The Outdoor Boys library had over 500 videos at that point, and fans were binge-watching everything. One single video reached 104 million views and was estimated to earn somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000 by itself. The channel became a business too. Sponsorships, merchandise, side projects, it all added up. Outdoor Boys as a brand was valued around $4.5 million. Luke's personal net worth was estimated at around $9 million, but that never seemed to be what mattered to him. Every time he spoke to his viewers, you could tell what he really cared about: his family, his faith, his happiness. But Luke Nichols didn't leave YouTube because he had to. He walked away while he was on top. In mid-2025, when he released what many believed was his final Outdoor Boys video, the channel wasn't declining. In fact, it was doing better than ever. Views were climbing, fans were growing by the day, and his videos were being watched across the world. But Luke made a decision that stunned everyone who only knew him from the screen. He chose to step away from fame, money, and global recognition, not because he was tired of success, but because something else mattered more. The headlines spread fast. News sites in the US, UK, India, and beyond all picked it up. Some called it a retirement. Others said it was a hiatus. But the message was the same. Luke Nichols was putting his family and faith ahead of everything else. For people who had followed him for years, it wasn't shocking. It was Luke being Luke. In his announcement, Luke didn't cry or make a big emotional spectacle. But every word felt heavy. He spoke about time. Not in a vague way, but in a very real, very urgent sense. He was exhausted, Most people never saw the long hours behind each video. They saw the camping trips, the funny moments, the creative builds, but they didn't see him editing late into the night while his kids slept. They didn't see him juggling daily parenting with a full-time YouTube grind. Luke was both the face of the channel and the stay-at-home dad. And that pressure was catching up with him. He admitted, "Fishing's not the most important thing in my life. My faith and my family are." That wasn't just a quote. It was a line he was now living by. Then he talked about privacy, something most fans didn't think about. Some strangers had started showing up near his home. They weren't dangerous, but they were uninvited. Curious fans, excited viewers. But to Luke, it meant his sons were growing up in a spotlight they didn't choose. He wanted to change that. He said, "There's more than one reason I'm doing this, but I mainly want to focus on my kids. I want to spend more time helping Tommy with his channel and preparing him to be an adult, which is going to be in less than 6 years." In those words, there was a quiet panic, a realization that time was running faster than he thought. Tommy was nearly a teenager already, and in 6 short years, he'd be 18. Luke confessed something else too. He had spent a lot of time building Outdoor Boys, growing it, perfecting it. But somewhere in that rush, the focus stayed too much on himself. It was time, he said, to start focusing on other people for a change. That shift wasn't just noble, it was deeply personal, and it was backed by something else. All 3 of his sons wanted to make YouTube videos. He chuckled when he said it, but there was truth behind the smile. Tommy was already making his own content on Outdoor Tom. Even young Nate had started showing interest in recording fishing trips. Luke must have known that if he kept pushing Outdoor Boys to bigger heights, his kids might never get their own turn. By stepping back, he wasn't quitting YouTube. He was passing the torch, quietly, gently, on his own terms. In the video, he chose his words carefully. He said, "This is going to be my last video for a while. Not goodbye, not farewell, just for a while." That phrasing gave fans hope, and he even mentioned that there were several half-finished videos he might release in a batch later. Homestead updates, camping adventures, travel clips. Maybe he'd share them at the end of the year. Maybe not. He left that door cracked open just enough to keep people wondering. The response from fans was massive. And it wasn't angry, it was grateful. Comments poured in across other platforms because YouTube comments were turned off. Many thanked him for the years of joy. Parents, especially, understood. One message said it best. "Thank you for showing the world what wholesome family fun looks like, and for knowing when to put your family first." Some viewers hoped he'd come back someday. Some even refused to believe he was done, but most accepted it with love. In the days that followed, Luke gave a few interviews. He made it clear that this new chapter wasn't about YouTube. It was about being present, being a dad, being a husband, being a follower of Jesus Christ. He said, "Following Jesus Christ made me a better man, husband, and father, and that now he wanted to live that way more fully." He also didn't rule out new ideas. Maybe one day he'd go back to practicing law. Or maybe he'd blend his legal skills and outdoor knowledge into something new. Or maybe, and this was the likeliest, he'd just spend more time doing homework with his kids, helping them grow, cheering from the bleachers at Little League, or fishing in the woods with no camera in sight. One thing he was clear about, though, the Outdoor Boys channel would stay up. The videos would remain. The adventures were real, and they'd continue. Just privately, now. Without the audience, without the uploads. Just life, the way it was meant to be lived. The Nichols family wasn't going dark. they were just stepping away from the stage. As of mid-2025, Luke Nichols was fully out of the spotlight. He had shifted his energy to faith, family, and the wilderness he always loved. Their dream property in Alaska, far from city noise, was becoming their quiet escape. They still kept their home in Virginia too, where Rebecca continued her career, and the boys kept their routines. Luke's focus was entirely on home life now. Tommy's channel was slowly growing, with Luke quietly helping behind the scenes. Tommy would be 18 in 2030. By then, he might be a full-fledged YouTuber, maybe even bigger than his dad. Luke might show up once in a while as a guest, but for the most part, he'd be the one holding the camera now, not standing in front of it. Nate and Jacob, the younger two, were getting what their big brother didn't: childhood away from cameras. Just family hikes, backyard fishing, laughter that didn't need likes or comments. That was Luke's gift to them. Financially, Luke was safe. His estimated net worth had crossed $9 million by the time he stepped away. Years of frugal living, smart decisions, and a successful YouTube career gave him the freedom to quit while still on top. He didn't have to chase views anymore. He had already won.